Late one night in 1979, Officer James Holloway was patrolling a quiet stretch of road on the outskirts of Chicago. The neighborhood was one of those forgotten places where the streetlights flickered like dying fireflies and the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far. James had been on the force for over a decade, and he'd seen his fair share of strange things: drunken brawls, domestic disputes, even the occasional oddball wandering the streets at night. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter. As he turned onto a desolate street, his headlights caught something unusual. A woman stood beneath a flickering street lamp, her figure illuminated in brief, erratic bursts. She was naked, save for a sheer veil that covered her face. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost luminous in the dim light, and her posture was stiff, her joints locked in place as though she were a mannequin. James slowed his cruiser to a crawl, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. He rolled down his window, the cool night air biting at his face. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called out. The woman didn't respond. She didn't even move. The silence of the night was oppressive, broken only by the low hum of the flickering street lamp. A cold unease crept up James' spine, settling in the pit of his stomach. He stepped out of the car, his hand hovering near his holster. "Miss, do you need help?" he asked again, his voice firmer this time. Slowly, mechanically, the woman turned her head toward him. Even though her face was hidden behind the veil, James felt the weight of her stare pressing against his chest, as though she were peering into his very soul. Then, something impossible happened. She took a step forward. But it wasn't natural. It was jerky, rigid, as though invisible strings were pulling her limbs. With each movement, a faint clicking sound filled the air, like old gears turning. James' breath hitched. He had encountered all kinds of strange things in his time as a cop, but this was different. He took a cautious step back. "Stay right there, miss," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. She didn't. She took another step, and then another, her movements becoming smoother, more fluid, as though she were adjusting to walking. James reached for his radio, but before he could call for backup, the woman collapsed. No sound. No struggle. Just a sudden, lifeless fall onto the pavement. James rushed to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. He knelt beside her, his fingers pressing against her neck to check for a pulse. Nothing. And yet her skin was warm. Too warm, almost feverish. Her chest didn't rise or fall with breath. She wasn't breathing, was she? James hesitated only a moment before scooping her up and laying her in the backseat of his cruiser. She weighed almost nothing, as though she were hollow. The hospital was quiet when James arrived, only a handful of night staff on duty. Dr. Robert Langley, a seasoned physician with graying hair and tired eyes, met him at the entrance. "You found her like this?" Dr. Langley asked, peering at the woman's unmoving form on the gurney. Standing in the street, James replied, "She won't talk. She won't move now, either." Dr. Langley frowned and motioned for the nurses to wheel her into a private examination room. James followed, his unease growing with each step. Inside the room, the woman remained motionless as the nurses checked her vitals. Her arms flopped unnaturally when they moved her, as though her joints were held together by nothing more than string. One nurse gasped when she felt for a pulse. "She has none." Dr. Langley's brow furrowed. "That's impossible. If she had no pulse, she wouldn't be," he hesitated. "Warm." He reached for the woman's veil. Something about it made the hairs on James' neck stand on end. "I wouldn't do that," James said quickly. Dr. Langley hesitated, then exhaled. "We need to see if she's injured." He lifted the veil. The woman's skin was flawless, too flawless, like porcelain. Her lips were stitched shut with thick, black thread. The nurses gasped and stepped back. James clenched his fists. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. Dr. Langley's hands trembled as he picked up a scalpel. "I'm going to cut the stitches. Maybe she's been." The moment the blade touched the thread, the room went silent. Then, a low rattling sound filled the space, like the creak of old wooden floorboards, like something waking up. The woman's lips peeled apart, the stitches snapping like brittle twigs. Her mouth stretched too wide, too deep. Inside, rows of jagged, needle-thin teeth gleamed under the fluorescent light. The rattling sound grew louder. It wasn't coming from her mouth, it was coming from inside her. James' stomach twisted. What the hell? The lights flickered. And then they went out. The hospital security team rushed toward the examination room, but by the time they arrived, the power had returned. The room was empty. No nurses, no doctors, no patients, no James Holloway. The entire hospital was deserted. A single gurney sat in the middle of the hallway. Upon it lay the veil, neatly folded. To this day, the hospital remains abandoned. No one remembers what happened. No records exist of the patients or staff who were there that night. It's as if they were erased from existence. But some say if you listen closely near the old hospital grounds, you can still hear the rattling sound echoing through the walls. And every so often, on the quiet streets of Chicago, beneath a flickering street lamp, a woman stands alone. Her skin pale, her joints stiff, a sheer veil covering her face, waiting for someone to lift it again. Over the years, the story of the veiled woman became a local legend. Teenagers dared each other to visit the abandoned hospital, though few ever made it past the front gates. Those who did claim to hear the rattling sound, faint but unmistakable, echoing through the empty halls. Some even swore they saw her, the veiled woman, standing in the shadows, her head tilted as though listening. James Holloway was never seen again. His cruiser was found parked outside the hospital, the keys still in the ignition. His radio was on, but all that came through was static. His family searched for answers, but none were ever found. The official report listed him as missing, presumed dead. But those who knew James, his fellow officers, his friends, refused to believe he was gone. They spoke of him in hushed tones, recounting the night he disappeared. They said he was a good cop, a man who always did his duty, even when it meant facing the unknown. And so the legend of the veiled woman grew. Some said she was a ghost, cursed to wander the earth for eternity. Others believed she was something far worse, a creature from another world, a predator that lured its victims with an innocent facade. Whatever she was, one thing was certain: she was still out there waiting. Years later, a young journalist named Sarah Mitchell decided to investigate the legend. She had grown up hearing the stories and was determined to uncover the truth. Armed with a flashlight and a tape recorder, she ventured into the abandoned hospital one stormy night. The building was in ruins, its walls crumbling and its floors littered with debris. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she made her way to the examination room where the veiled woman had last been seen. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of decay lingered. As she entered the room, her flashlight flickered. She shook it, cursing under her breath, but the light grew dimmer. And then she heard it, the rattling sound. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. Her heart raced as she turned toward the source of the noise. There, in the corner of the room, stood the veiled woman. Her skin was pale, her joints stiff. The sheer veil covered her face, but Sarah could feel her gaze, cold and unyielding. The rattling sound was coming from inside her, a low, guttural noise that seemed to vibrate through the air. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. She was frozen in place, her eyes locked on the veiled woman. Slowly, the woman raised her hand, her fingers trembling as though struggling against an unseen force. She pointed at Sarah, and then, with a sudden, jerky motion, she beckoned. The flashlight went out. The room was plunged into darkness. Sarah's scream was cut short as the rattling sound grew deafening, filling the room, the hallway, the entire hospital. When the power returned, the room was empty. Sarah was gone. All that remained was her tape recorder, still running. The only sound it captured was the faint, unmistakable rattle of the veiled woman. To this day, the hospital remains abandoned, a silent monument to the horrors that unfolded within its walls. And on quiet nights when the streetlights flicker and the shadows stretch too far, the veiled woman still stands, waiting for someone to lift her veil once more.
That's all for today's video. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments down below. And make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more future updates. See you next time.